Geek Wisdom, and welcome to the final installment in the Specter V2 build series. This episode is all about the Maiden Flight, right? It's about how to do your pre-flight checks and how to have a successful maiden of the Specter V2, or really any helicopter for that matter. So we're going to talk about some best practices and the way I like to maiden my helicopters, and hopefully you can find something to help you. All right, first thing I try and do is I try and maiden the helicopter on a day I know some respected pilots that I trust will be around. I do this so that I can have another set of eyes on the helicopter before I put it into the air for the first time, right? I've been building it by myself this whole time. It's the first time I've brought it out. So I want someone to look it over. I want them to mechanically check everything, make sure I have all the blades on correctly. I don't have a backwards blade, or I'm not missing a bolt somewhere, or there's nothing obvious that's mechanically wrong with the helicopter that they can identify before I ever spool it up. And you're going to turn your transmitter on and plug the helicopter in, and then from there you're going to work with them to check all of your control throws and directions. You're going to check your gyro corrections together. They're going to sort of run you through a checklist that they would do. So you just sort of follow their lead and turn the helicopter, left when they ask you to and right when they ask you to, all on the bench, without it being spooled up. And they're just double checking that everything's working correctly in the direction it should. So a second set of eyes can be huge to catch mistakes that maybe you'd miss in the excitement of the maiden day. All right, assuming you get through that step, some other best practices. The first time I spool up a helicopter, I'm going to do it without a canopy on. The only reason I do that is that a canopy to replace it on a 700 is anywhere from $80 to $100. And if anything's going to go wrong catastrophically in a maiden, it's going to happen in about the first 30 seconds of the flight generally. And not having your canopy on can just reduce that repair cost by $100. So it's just some good, safe insurance. From there, other best practices, I'm going to place the helicopter in a place to spool it up in the orientation that's most comfortable for me. For my case, it's always going to be tail directly into myself. If something goes wrong, I want the helicopter to be in an orientation I'm most comfortable with. I'm certainly fine with the nose in hover, but I don't want to spool a helicopter for the first time when I'm nervous nose in. It's just not an orientation I'm as comfortable as tail in. So keep it on a soft surface in an orientation that's very comfortable for you. The next thing from there is, remember when we were building the helicopter, I talked about keeping a checklist of things you needed to do? Well, hopefully that checklist really only has one thing left on it, or maybe a couple. Check your gyro corrections, check your control directions, and ESC calibration is generally something you have to do at the field for the first time. Now, every speed controller is a little bit different. In the case of the Hobbywing, what they want you to do is spool it up at 0 pitch, at 50% throttle for 30 seconds, and then you hit your throttle hold and unplug the battery and plug it back in to cycle the power, and then your ESC is calibrated and good to go. Every speed control is a little bit different. If you have a Contronic or a YGE or a Scorpion, there may be different instructions there. So follow the manufacturer's instructions for how to initially calibrate your ESC, and make sure you get that done before you lift it into the air for the first time. All right, so with all those things done, the next thing to think about is a checklist for your maiden flight. Now, obviously, you shouldn't be looking away at a piece of paper. You're just kind of building a mental list of the things you want to do, or a plan for your maiden flight, right? I don't want to lift the helicopter up into a hover and not have a plan, right? I want to know what I'm going to do as part of the maiden flight, and what are the sort of my order of priorities that I want to check. And I always follow a pretty similar path on my maiden flights. So, first thing I'm going to do is spool it up at 0 pitch and listen, right? I want to make sure there's not any funky sounds, anything horribly mechanically wrong. There's not really a sound I can describe you should be listening for, but trust me, if you hear a sound that's really strange, you'll know it, and you should immediately hit throttle hold and investigate what the cause of that is. So, spool it up, 0 pitch, everything's fine, helicopter's stable, on the pad still, I don't hear anything horribly wrong. From there, I now feel safe to go ahead and lift it into a hover. So I'm going to lift it straight up to about 4 to 6 feet in the air to get out of ground effect. And I'm just going to kind of relax there and see how things are. Again, I'm going to listen, everything's stable, any weird sounds, any first sign of trouble, hit throttle hold, bring it safely in. And then the very next thing I'm going to do are check all of my control throws, or not throws, but directions. So I'm going to give it a little bit of forward cyclic, it goes forward, backward cyclic, it goes back, left, it goes left, right, it goes right. That's great. I'm going to give it some left rudder, it turns to the left, right rudder, it turns to the right. Positive pitch, it goes up, negative pitch, it goes down. Right? I want to make sure all of those things are working in the direction they should be. If they aren't, try and get it down as safely as possible and figure out the cause. Assuming you get to this point, and we're like, great, everything's working, we've gotten through the initial checks, we're through the worst of the Maiden, when things are most likely to go horribly wrong, we're just going to move it forward now into some gentle forward circuits. So I'm going to take it out of a hover, and I'm just going to do some gentle figure eights, and all I'm really looking for here is I'm just initially exploring the helicopter, right? Is everything working correctly? Is everything acting as it should? Is anything horribly wrong going on at this point, right? I'm looking for excessive vibrations as it moves around. Is the tail fin wagging back and forth so fast it's a blur, right? The bottom of the fin is a little blurry. You can't even really see it or focus on it, right? That's a sign of excessive tail vibration. Same thing for the skids of the helicopter. Are they fairly stable in your vision, or are they vibrating so much that they're blurry? That's another sign that there's something causing excessive vibration in the helicopter, and you should probably land and then investigate the cause of that, right? Take the blades off, see if you can recreate it, etc. But assuming we get through all of those things, the very next thing I'll do is some faster forward flight in a straight line. And what I'm looking for here are any bobbles in the head, which will show up as the boom kind of vibrating up and down, slower or smooth, slower or faster, any kind of bobble in the tail boom as it goes by. And you're just making mental notes of things to tune later. I don't usually tune a ton or at all much on my first flights, unless the tail gain is excessively high kind of thing. I'm really just kind of trying to learn a little bit about the helicopter and think about the things I'm going to work on in the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. flights moving forwards. Assuming we get that far and everything looks okay and feels safe, from there I'm going to move into I'm going to bring it back and move into some pyros, right? I want to check a few things on the pyros here. I'm going to bring it to a nice stable level hover, and then I'm going to slowly accelerate into a faster pyro, and I want to make sure the helicopter stays in one place for the most part, right? If it veers off radically in one direction fairly quickly, if it drifts a little bit in the wind, no big deal. If it veers off quickly, it's an indication that your Swashplate is probably out of level, and that's something you need to figure out even before you get too deep into tuning from there, right? Assuming, you pyro it, it stays reasonably in the same spot. I move on from there. The next thing I'll look at is the pyro rate. How fast does it pyro? Is it too fast for me? Is it too slow for me? Is it just right? Everyone has some different preferences there. I like mine to pyro fairly slowly. And I make a mental note about that and think about that rate. And then I'm going to go back into forward flight again. I'm going to start working towards challenging the tail at this point. So I want to see how my tail gain's doing. So I'm going to move it into some slow funnels, and then listen to the tail there. Is it chattering? Is it getting angry, as we call it? Making, kind of noises. You'll recognize them when you hear them. Or is it sounding okay? Is it holding okay? Is it too loose? Is it blowing out and letting go in those maneuvers? And I'll get into more aggressive funnels progressively. I don't want to get too aggressive right out of the gate, because if something's wrong, I want to know it, land, and fix it. And then some more aggressive funnels, and then some sideways loops can really challenge the tail as well. And again, you really want to run your maidens to your skill level, right? If you hear someone saying like, oh, I like to do, pyro flips on my maiden flights, and that helps me tune the whatever, that's great for them that they can do that. I can't do a pyro flip. So I, tune to my ability, right? I do the most advanced maneuvers I can do that challenge the tail and the head, and then I tune those to my ability. You should do the same. If all you can do is hover and some little basic flight, great. Thrilled to have you in the hobby. Tune to that ability, right? So I'll do those things, and I will, challenge the tail progressively. In the case of my Specter, I ended up dropping the tail gain 2 points from the Neo's default of 70 to 68. It seems to be doing fantastic there. I'm super happy. The Azure 115 tail blades are working great with the 715 mains. Super happy there. All right. So the next thing I'll do from there is I start working on the tail optimizer. Now this is a feature unique to the Neo, but maybe your FBL has something similar that you need to do. And basically you do a series of hard stops with the tail where you do a full revolution and then let go of the stick. And then the flybarless unit actually learns how to hard stop the tail by feeling the reaction. So the first one is a little sloppy and the tail wags, and then it slowly gets smaller, and by the fourth one it's going boom and locking into place as it should. So I do some of those. The other optimizer the Neo has to do with flips and rolls. So that's the next thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to work into flipping and rolling in all directions. And I want to learn a few things here. Number one, I'm trying to teach the optimizer about it. And number two, I want to feel like what my agility and style and other settings, and your FBL will call them something different, but they'll all be similar. How do those feel? Does it flip and roll at a rate that I'm happy with? Do I wish it flipped faster? Do I wish it rolled faster? You know, what settings, you know, just make notes later about things you want to go back and tune from there. Or are you happy with the rate it's doing those things? So I look at that. Now, at this point, I'm starting to feel pretty confident and I can kind of relax into the Maiden, right? I've gotten through all the scary stuff. Everything's working as it should. I haven't had any major incidents. Everything's behaving well. There's nothing crazy going on that I need to worry about. And it's at this point when you catch your breath, you should think about telemetry and timers, right? How are you, like, what system are you using to know when to land? Are you using a timer in the radio? If you are, did you hear it counting down from however many minutes you set it to the first time? Did you hear the alert at, 2 minutes telling you there's 2 minutes left? If you didn't, maybe it's a good time to think about landing early and getting that addressed before we accidentally fly way too long and drain our battery pack to the point of damaging it. If you're using a telemetry-based alarm where it's counting down battery capacity to you or making announcements about, voltage or milliamps consumed or however your radio and telemetry system works, did you hear those announcements, or does the switch that triggers that announcement work for you? Take a minute to check those things before you accidentally drain the battery pack too long. So we've got our telemetry working. We've checked, most of the basics of initial tuning, and scary things, and everything is working out well. At this point, you get a little bit of free time in the flight just to sort of gently explore the flight envelope of the helicopter. Double check any of the things we covered earlier. Do some more funnels, rolls, loops, whatever it is that you want to do to kind of just check out the helicopter. If you have more than one bank or more than one head speed, you can explore all of those. This, again, is a great time to have a buddy with you at the flight line as well. In my case, Sean Hall walked out to the flight line with me and was standing next to me. So if I wanted him to look at my transmitter and call out the RPM to me, I can just ask him. So instead of me being nervous trying to look at the helicopter and glance at the transmitter, I can just call and say, hey, what does the RPM read out? And he can look over and tell me what it is in each bank. And then also just be another set of eyes. But anyway, so check your RPMs and all of your banks. You may want to repeat, your flips and rolls and puro rates in all 3 banks and see how it changes with different head speeds and make some mental notes about how you might want to adjust that in the future. Anyway, by now, it's probably time to land. We're going to bring the helicopter over another nice, soft, level spot. Bring it a couple feet off the ground, hit throttle hold, settle it in for a nice landing. Make your throttle cut safe, and then take a deep breath. You made it. You got through the Maiden, things are successful. You have a gigantic grin on your face. I'm going to talk in the video about what you should do right after that moment when we get to that point in the video. But for now, it's enough for me yammering. Let's go ahead and take a look at some pre-flights and my maiden flight of the Specter V2. All right, so it's Maiden Day. Got the Specter V2 here ready to go. Got our batteries in it. They're not plugged in yet, but they're here and ready. And we're going to go through the important pre-flight checks. So obviously we spent a lot of work in the workshop getting this set, so we're not going to do, check every nut and bolt. We're going to assume we did a good job on the build there. What we are going to do is spend a little extra time checking all of our control throws and directions and making sure those are correct. So I'm going to take you through those one by one. First, we're going to do the directions controlled by the transmitter. So when the transmitter tells the helicopter to go forward, is it going forwards? Is it going backwards, left, right? Is the tail going left or right? And then we're going to talk about the gyro corrections. Or, the gyro is there to keep the helicopter stable in flight, and we want to make sure those corrections are set the correct way. If they're not, what happens is the helicopter starts to drift to the right, and the gyro, instead of correcting to the left, adds more correction to the right because it's set incorrectly, and then the helicopter will literally just flip itself into the ground, and you can end your maiden flight within about 20 seconds of starting it. So obviously we want to avoid that. So let's go ahead and get our power connected and transmitter turned on. We're going to make sure that our throttle cuts are enabled. In the case of the V control, I have both a throttle cut as well as a motor safety switch. So I have to trigger 2 switches in order to get the rotor to spin up. So if your transmitter has that capability, do add a second safety switch. It's just a nice to have. I'm going to go ahead and turn on our transmitter here. Make sure all our switches are in the correct direction. Another quick tip, I set my transmitter up so all my switches face away from me at the beginning of the flight with the exception of the motor safety switch and my throttle cut switch. And then I can just do a quick glance and know that everything's okay. So let's go ahead and power things up here. I always sort of take a step back from the helicopter when it powers up, just in case, God forbid, something stupid happens and the thing spools up. I don't want to be next to it. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and just select the correct battery here in the transmitter. So now we've got that all set. Let's go ahead and we're going to turn the helicopter this way, sideways, and we're going to put in forward cyclic. You can see that when we go forward on our transmitter here, that the front of the swash plate dips down. We're going to check backwards. We go backwards, back of our swash plate goes down. I'm going to turn the helicopter towards you here. We're going to go left cyclic, and you can see the left side of the swash plate goes down. I'm going to go right cyclic, again here, and the right-hand side of our swash plate goes down. We're going to go positive collective, full positive. The whole swash plate in unison, all three servos go up. Full negative, all three servos go down. So we know that all of our directions from the transmitter are correct. Now let's look at gyro correction. So I've gone ahead and just set my collective to center stick, and we're going to go ahead and check how this works. So when I lean the helicopter this way, the swash plate should go the other way and try and maintain level. So let's see if it does. So can you see that as I rock the helicopter back and forth, the swash plate is doing its very best to stay level. So it is leaning in such a way that the swash plate goes level. All right? Now we're going to check the same thing front to back. When I lean the helicopter forwards, the swash plate should go backwards. And it does. You can see this pin going down as I rock it forwards. As I rock it back, it goes up. Back, it goes up. So those gyro corrections are correct. Now let's go ahead and look at the tail. Let's go ahead and spin that to you. And we're going to look at the trailing edge of the top rotor blade, right? So we've got our top rotor blade, and because it rotates counterclockwise, it'll go in this direction. So we're looking at the trailing edge. This is the leading edge of the blade. This is the trailing edge here. And it should go the same direction as the rudder stick. So when I go left, it goes left. When I go right, it goes right. Left, right. So again, the trailing edge should follow the stick. Left, right. Left, right. Okay, that's correct. All right. Now we want to check the gyro correction here. So what happens is, as I pull the tail this way, the trailing edge of this top blade should come towards me. It should follow the movement. So you can see it does. And when I move it this way, the trailing edge should also go that way. And it does. So you can see that as I move the boom back and forth, the trailing edge of the top blade should travel the same direction that I'm moving the boom. So these are our pre-flight checks here. We've checked that our gyro correction on the tail and on the main head is correct. We've checked all of our controls are going in the correct direction. We've checked positive and negative collective, left cyclic, right cyclic, forward cyclic, back cyclic. Everything is looking good and ready to go. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take it out to the pad and spool it up for our maiden.
Rotor on.
Takes just a second. Bit of a slow spool in the Hobbywing. Here it goes. You can see it's just straightening the blades there. A little bit of shake. That's a real slow head speed here. Only 1300 RPM in my bank one. Now I'm going to go ahead and lift it off the ground. And I'm just being gentle with it. Yep, right is right. Left is left. Forward is forward. Back is back. All right. Left is left, right is right. Okay, so all the corrections are going the right way. That's good. Tracking looks good. I'm just going to give it a little more head speed here in bank 2. And let's see how it pyros. Tiny bit of drift there, some of which can just be the wind. It's doing pretty well. All right, now at this point, I'm going to take it around a little. And now that I know it's good, I'm probably going to land in just a second and put the canopy on, because it's not super easy to see this thing against the tree line here and an overcast sky. So, going to get to a nice flat level spot.
Rotor idle. Rotor off.
All right, we're going to get the canopy now that the helicopter's safe. This should be a lot easier to see now. I'm going to go back to bank 1 and spool it up.
Well, that's a lot easier to see. Doing a few hard stops each direction, letting that tail optimizer do its thing, and just seeing how it does.
Thank you.
Alright, so now, just going to do some forward flight, and we're going to look at the tail boom. We're looking for bobbles here as it moves forward, and if so, we'll start working on tuning our head gain. But for now, we're just going to do a couple of passes back and forth, get an initial feel. Now, like I said, I have done the original Maiden. Didn't have to do any head tuning. Stock settings were great, which was 50 in the Vbar. That's what I set it at. And then we're going to start looking at the tail here. We're going to start to challenge it just a little bit. A little bit of a funnel here.
Battery 70%.
And then we'll see how it does. But we're just getting a feel for how it goes. Nice gentle flips. I hear my battery telemetry is working, by the way, so that's good. You want to check all of those things. If you don't hear it start to work, then something's wrong in your initial setup or your timer, however you're setting your flight time management. Sideways loops there are a great test for the tail as well. Start doing a little more aggressive testing of the tail here.
Battery 60%.
We're listening for chattering. Don't hear any of that. It all sounds great. And at this point you can start to relax, right? Like you've made it through the Maiden. Everything's flying in the right direction. It's all working out okay. And we can start to check some other things. Is our RPM sensor working? Is our governor working? Let's check bank 3, see how that feels. Just gonna pull it into a stable hover and see what RPM we've got in bank 3. Beautiful, 1800 RPM, which is probably low for a lot of you.
100%.
But that's where I like to fly my 700s. General low head speed, so they're geared accordingly between 1300 and 1800 generally. It's the sweet spot where I like. Just try to make the tail angry here.
Battery 40%.
And you can look at your Puro rate. I run a pretty slow yaw rate or Puro rate compared to most. Now that's full Puro rate for me, which is not super fast.
Battery 30%.
And towards the end of the flight, start thinking about maybe what you might want to tune. You know, depending on your FBL and the settings, do you want it to flip and roll faster than it is? You know, give it a couple rolls, and you can flip it in a couple directions. No, that's nice and slow. It's about where I like mine. Alright, in the other direction. Beautiful. Alright, so now we're getting close to 10% battery. We're going to be a little conservative here. And go ahead and land. Go down to bank one. Just going to take one more look at tracking. The tips of the blades look like they're traveling through the same path. In my case, the answer is yes, even at low head speed. And with that, we have a successful Maiden.
Rotor off.
So again, check your directions, check your gyro directions. Take it easy on the flight at first. I know there's a lot of flight videos on the Hangout where guys go from Maiden, a couple of pitch pumps, a Piro, and then they go ballistic, and you know, that's great for them, but that's not how I roll. I think what you saw here is a more typical conservative Maiden, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can sort of ease into how aggressive you get with a helicopter. And with that, I've got a successful Maiden on the Egodrift powered Specter 700 V2. That's the completed Maiden of the Specter 700 V2. Really the only thing left to do at this point that I like to do after the first flight, go ahead and take the canopy off, and what we're going to do is we're going to look over every single nut and bolt in the system. We're going to feel the temperature of the motor, temperature of the ESC, make sure nothing's screaming hot or hotter than it should be. Obviously it depends on what kind of motor. Egodrift motors tend to run a lot cooler than a lot of other brands. Take a look at every single nut and bolt, your links, make sure nothing's backed out. Really, I'll do this, you know, right after the first Maiden flight, and then after the Maiden day, you know, assuming I put a few more flights on it that day, and then really give everything a thorough look over, make sure nothing's vibrated out, make sure you didn't forget Loctite on something, especially check all the components around the tail, the rotor head, you know, all the way around the helicopter, make sure everything looks, you know, really good and solid. And then with that, all you have left to do is enjoy the heck out of it. So thanks for coming along on this journey with me on the Specter 700 V2 build. Any questions, please feel free to go ahead and drop them below in the comments. We're all happy to help as much as we can. And with that, I'm Nick Wisdom, and this is Hack TV. Thanks for watching another build series here.
Helidirect!